Welcome to Career Practitioner Conversations. This podcast is presented by the National Career Development Association. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Melissa Venable, NCDA Director of Professional Development, and this episode continues our 2025 DEI Symposium Series with a conversation about career pathways for neurodivergent learners. I'm here with two veteran teachers. They are also a husband and wife duo, Nulty and Maisie Lynch from Olney, Maryland. Nulty is an English language arts department chair and certified autism specialist. And Maisie is the internship coordinator at her school, a certified career services provider, and a college counselor. She's also the president of Future Ready U, a college and career coaching and consulting company. So Nulty and Maisie, thank you so much for bringing this conversation from the conference to this podcast. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. I am super excited to be here, and it works out really well because Nulty and I have been talking a lot recently about neurodivergencies, especially as we have started back up with the school year. And one of the things that we have been talking about just last night, Nulty, was, remember, we had this conversation about universal learning or universal design.
The frustration with the lack of use of it. In spheres, right.
So I think probably what would help listeners is they know we're married, but let's maybe hone in a little bit on what's gotten us to this point and why this is such a passion of both of ours from different perspectives, but equally passionate about it. And we'll start with you.
So I am... as was said earlier, I'm a veteran teacher now. I'm a career changer. And a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with autism, which explained a ton of my interactions through the world. And then that combined with my other adulthood diagnosis of ADHD. And I immediately started doing what you called my doctorate in autism, where I essentially approached every book that I could find that I felt was not from sort of a fear-mongering, but really a modern scientific and sociological point of view. And what I then realized is the masking that I've been carrying around, this idea that I have been acting to be neurotypical in order to fit in. And this is something that we see across most neurodivergent individuals, and this idea that you learn to be a certain way. And in unpacking that and this unmasking, you start to notice the difficulties that I had. And then being an educator of young people, I teach middle school. I really wanted to see what can I do to limit or alleviate the obstacles and difficulties and emotional trauma that really comes along with being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. And then that tied really into the work that you've been doing post starting your teaching career. And
For sure.
Yeah.
I've come at this, I think, very much from both a personal and professional perspective. As a teacher, for 20 years, I've had lots of students come through my door who may have had diagnosed or undiagnosed neurodivergencies that has resulted in a lot of executive functioning issues, which really plays out in the classroom. However, I also was our college and career research and development teacher for 10 years. So I was charged with helping students come up with their post-secondary plans and then actually helping them to get there. And what I saw was that a lot of students, they may have been able to articulate to me, let's say, if I talked to them about it or asked them some questions, but when it came down to being able to actually follow the pathway from A to Z to get them to apply for the job, apply for college, whatever process sort of they needed to follow, this is where those executive functioning skills or a lack of them or deficiencies would really rear its head. And I realized that this is a really big issue. I started doing more research on it, and there was an article that I put out in Career Convergence about it, because the data out there is really clear that there are higher rates of unemployment and underemployment for those who are neurodivergent.
And these numbers are really kind of shocking. Like, we think that these might be just deviations or standard deviations, but like neurodivergent individuals, and we'll get to like the difference between that. I want to talk about that in a second, but it's 10 times higher than neurotypical individuals. The one that got me is the autistic individuals with college degrees. So, people like me their unemployment rate is 20 times higher. So a vast percentage of people who sort of fit my mold, an autistic person who manages to mask their way or figure out a way through college, a large percentage of them are either unemployed or deeply underemployed.
Well, I can think of it even just having been an observer for your own career track, right? And where you've struggled at certain spots, where it may have been, there was a period where there was like indecision and not being able to make the decision about what you really wanted to do. Remember that period?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and then I ended up in a second job purely because the company went under. I got forced into a decision.
You got forced into a decision. And then, even then, it was like, okay, I know I want to do this, but then getting yourself through that process of, you wanted to go through an alternative certification program. So it was like, okay, step by step, going through that process and hitting obstacles along the way, which, let's be honest, it's hard for anyone to do. Going and putting themselves out there, going and looking for a job is hard for anyone. But then when you go ahead, hon.
Sorry. And I think if I hadn't had
an amazing wife,
wife,
that's where that was going.
who had already done the process 4 years earlier than me.
Yeah, probably.
Five is this. So 4 or 5 years earlier than me. So you knew the people there, you knew the process there, you knew what the paperwork looked like, you knew when the paperwork was due. You had relationships with these people, and someone like me who has the capacity to do it, but the executive functioning is where I can fake it. It often is completely exhausting and can be debilitating. I don't know if I would have been able to, I would have still been like in a cubicle 15 years on, as opposed to being here and talking about the students I've had for the last 15 years.
I know that's why you keep me around, honey.
I know that absolutely.
And I think it's important to mention, I've said executive functioning, but obviously there's other barriers that come to play also. That's sort of like the low-hanging fruit, easy one to identify. But there are so many more that are both visible but also invisible for people. So I want to circle back around to that at some point.
And I mean, you've said repeatedly that it's like we're trying to work with the systems, and some of these systems work, and some of these systems don't work, and some of these systems actively are harmful. They're in play, and because they've been designed by people who aren't thinking about the breadth of human neurophysiology. And I want to,
go ahead.
I want to go to that because.
Well, give me a second. Let me finish this thought.
Please.
Okay. So I want to just hone back into sort of where I have evolved into what I'm doing now.
Of course.
Is, seeing it play out in the classroom, and then seeing it play out in my own life and my personal life, and really realizing that there is opportunity here to help advocate for individuals with neurodivergencies and to create systems and processes that make things more accessible for them. And that's where Future Ready You came from. And then we've sort of building out from there, you and I trying to navigate this together, but also with very different perspectives and very different goals. And so, which I love that we can do that. But you're like my walking, you have the lived experience, firsthand personal experience. You have the insane knowledge, the unofficial PhD that you've done on autism, when your special interest is autism.
Right.
And
easy.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
I wanted to set up a few terms because I think I often will just start using them under the assumption that people who are interested in this topic understand the topic already. And so I've been using, the term neurodiverse has been used a lot recently. It's in social media all over the place. And neurodiverse really just applies to how everybody's brain functions differently, everybody in the world. And we can kind of get our head around that we all approach things slightly differently.
The scientist in me just compares it to biodiversity. The idea that there's all these different, obviously we're not talking species, but it's the same concept here, right? We have this diverse just by nature. And
so unfortunately that word usually gets conflated sometimes with neurodivergent. And neurodivergent means that these are individuals whose thinking processes differ significantly from the norm. They are not part of the normal spectrum of thinking. And then, so these are autism, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. And this is where it could, because we think neurodiversity is the spectrum, and then we talk about autism as a spectrum. They're not quite, there isn't everybody's a little to super being autistic to Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man or someone who's nonverbal. So when we talk neurodivergent, we're really talking about people who have very specific ways of interacting with the world in a different way. And these aren't right or wrongly, although historically they've been treated that way, especially in our educational system. And then sort of on the opposite pole of neurodivergent, we talk about neurotypical. And neurotypical is the person who doesn't have ADHD, doesn't have autism, just, wakes up and is able to make a cup of coffee without thinking about it, forms habits because they want to form a habit. So.
Well, and I think it's important to distinguish the language, but I also think it's easy to get hung up on the language. And as a career service provider, what I try to be really mindful of, but I never get just perfectly, is that it's changing and it really depends who you talk to, what the context is, right? Even when we talk about, I know I've been doing some writing stuff recently, and I'm always going, okay, do I say individuals with autism? Do I say autistic individuals? Do I say people with ADHD? And so from my own perspective, I hope our listeners understand that there is no judgment, nothing. If I do misspeak in some way, it is purely because it's not intentional. It's not, and please, I always want to do better. So I appreciate feedback and knowing, and that's why I loved having you around, because you have, you're someone who, this is you, this defines you. So you really have a voice in this that I think is really important.
I think the tricky part is if you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Right.
And so I prefer to say I'm an autistic person. There are other people who say, which is gaining in usage disability first language is gaining in usage. It's a spin-off of, it really comes from, in many ways, the deaf rights community in the 80s and 90s. But when you see people talking about their children, often they talk about they have a child with autism. And so really the only way, especially if you're working with these individuals, is just to say, how do you want to be? How should I refer to you?
Right.
It's just the same as if you ask someone their name. If you're going to be talking about their disability, and when we're thinking about putting people into careers, helping people get into careers, helping people get into college, disability is something that at least between sort of the career services provider and the client needs to be discussed. Whether or not it gets disclosed beyond that, it needs to be discussed. So just like you would ask what name they want to be called, if you're discussing someone's neurodivergency or other disability, you would ask them, how should I be referring to you? And then realize with the next person who comes along, you need to ask the question again. And then
Well, it reminds me of my student. And I had a student last year, Abby, we'll just say Abby, who was on the spectrum. And we became very close because I had them for 2 years. But I remember saying something about the superpower. And it was just like,
is Abby who I'm thinking is Abby?
Yeah. And that's not even fair to say Abby. I should be using another name, but
yeah. But I think, me. But then again, if you're,
but that's what we see. Social media is superpower.
Right. And this is where, one of the things I like to talk about, some of the most interesting research gets into this double empathy problem, which talks about how neurotypical people talk to neurodivergent people. And historically, I realize all of this history is new, like 1950s new. The first person who was diagnosed with autism just died.
1950s is considered new?
Well, yeah. As far as scientific discoveries go. So, but the first person ever to be officially diagnosed with autism just died of old age. So it isn't like in the far distant past. And so typically neurodivergent individuals are seen from like a deficit model. So you say an autistic person struggles with communication skills. And what the research says is that's not actually the case. I want to talk about the interesting work that's going into how we talk to each other, how neurotypical people talk to neurodivergent people and backwards and forwards. And when you look at this, neurodivergence as a concept is quite new. It's mid-
The terminology,
even the diagnoses is from the 1930s. This isn't stuff that is, it's not like we're talking about tuberculosis, right? This is still very much in flux, very much figuring these things out. But it has historically been a person with autism struggles with communication skills. And the research recently has shown that that's not really the case. That when an autistic person talks to an autistic person, there is very little communication difficulties. They click immediately. They understand there's a communication style that works very, very well. Much like when a neurotypical person talks to a neurotypical person. If they have some kind of shared interest, they are able to communicate at length with each other. The difficulty comes when a neurotypical person tries to communicate with a neurodivergent person or vice versa. And the research is showing that the difficulty actually happens on both ends. And where I think that's really important in this work is this idea that when you're talking to somebody and you say, you have a client, and as I get with students, their parent says to me, he's autistic. And they say it like
you're going to catch it if you say it too loud.
Well, like I'm going to catch it. Or they're apologetic. They're apologizing in advance And then I say, well, I'm autistic too. And they go, oh, and some of them get really excited. Some
and
of
you're
them,
like, and I went to UVA and I have a job and I'm married and I have
right.
Life.
And
There's life.
some of them love that. And then some of them are very confused by it. But this idea, if you're approaching a client, you know they're autistic, or if you've been around enough autistic people, you can make a reasonably educated guess about it. You need to realize that your communication, if the communication starts to break down, it is not just on the part of the neurodivergent individual. Both sides, the communication is breaking down on both sides, and it is not, and especially in sort of a client relationship, it should not be the other person's responsibility.
Right. Like because they're autistic, they can't communicate well.
Or that it's their job then to communicate with you in a way that works solely for you. And
well, I think the important thing there is being sort of reading the room and being able to step back a little bit and just say, hey, I feel like maybe I'm not wording this well. Maybe, what do you need from me so that I can better explain this or whatever? Like, be reflective, right? That's always being willing to ask for feedback and take that feedback.
Do something with the feedback.
And do something. You reminded me, Nulty, do you remember when I was working with that client maybe 2 years ago, Andy? And I'm on, like, literally on Zoom with him, and he was autistic, and I'm talking back and forth with him, and I'm trying to, like, explain to him about the interview process. And we're like debriefing after he had an interview. And I'm just and I can feel, I'm just keep hitting this wall and hitting this wall. And I looked over at you were like in the kitchen, and I'm like, Nulty, Andy, do you mind if I bring my husband in this conversation? He's like, yeah, no, that's fine. Bring you in. And the two of you, it was just like,
yeah,
like,
I could go, what she meant to say was this.
Yeah.
Here's how you should handle it. Here's what you should do. Here's what that person really meant when they said it. I mean, and this gets into sort of you said earlier, this idea of like, it's a superpower, and that gives me the ick. But there are absolutely skill sets that neurodivergent individuals excel in that, you had mentioned earlier, hyperfocus. This is often used as sort of like a clue that someone should be diagnosed, that you get into a topic and you get into the topic.
Which, if I'm hiring computer programmers, I want that person.
Yeah. And so we see this, and almost it's cute when sometimes we talk about it when we see little kids, autistic little kids, and they're really into trains, or they're really into sharks, or they're really into dinosaurs. And then you go, oh, and then you talk to that kid and you realize that they know more about dinosaurs than anyone you've ever heard of in their life, because that is their thing. And so if you're hiring someone and you manage to find someone whose hyperfocus is Perl, and you really need someone to code Perl, this kid or adult is going to know more than they'll ever need to know about the topic.
Well, and to be fair, I jumped into IT because that sort of is a stereotypical place, but let's move it out of that. Let's think of, like, you need someone to do research at a museum. You need someone. I mean, that jumped to mind is just any field, especially where there's an appreciation for that expert, very focused expert opinion on or knowledge on something.
Yeah. I mean, there is a reason why some of these stereotypes exist, because these sort of jobs do allow a person to step away from sort of customer-facing events. You might be dealing a lot of customer-facing stuff, and then you go, oh, I'm going to go do my research, and then you have an opportunity to step back and have an opportunity to kind of be in different spaces. Whereas if you're just working customer service, like I did for years, there's no stepping back. And
it'll impact you, do you think, as an employee? How did that impact you?
As an employee, it certainly wasn't as proficient. As a husband in our early marriage, can we
unpack that? How much time do we have?
This is a short podcast.
Let me see.
But a lot of times, they'll bring these things home. This is what especially because in the age group I work with, 13, 14-year-olds, this dysregulation comes home. So like, how do we?
Yeah, because we had conversations with teachers about our own kids, right? Where it was like, I don't understand. They're fine at school. They're fine at school. They're fine at school. And then you're like, yeah, because they're keeping it together all day long at school.
Right. I mean, and then we think like, what could, like, but obviously something's going wrong at school, and then they're just managing to mask themselves or just contain themselves well enough before they got home.
Right. So same thing, apply it to work environment.
Right. So like, what's this? Like, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing, thinking about neurodivergent individuals or any sort of inclusivity, what would that be?
Oh, you mean like in the context of the work?
Of like hiring, career development?
To me,
I want to talk about myself and my own life experience for hours, but like coming back to the client relationship, we're trying to get meaningful.
Well, there are two things. Number one, I just want to mention the double empathy. You made me think of that little trio of students that I had during first period last year, that they were all three besties, all three on the spectrum, and they spoke the same language. They were so in tune with each other. Yeah. And that to me was really eye-opening because there was nothing forced about it. This is high school. We're not tracking kids, and it's not like we don't have an autism program here where all of our kids travel in a pack. These are kids that are it was just purely organic how they connected with each other and became best buddies. But I think it really lends itself to that, what you were talking about. So
it's interesting if you think about that and you saw 3 neurotypical kids in the classroom all chatting it up, it wouldn't.
No, but
it would be normal because we see these other kids in awkward situations, them struggling, and then to see them not struggle.
Yeah.
Shows, I think, that the struggle isn't just about them.
No, for sure. It's a different way of communicating, I think. But so back to your question, the magic
wand.
Okay.
Fix whatever.
So for me, I feel like, there's definitely just the whole like executive functioning, getting started, doing the job searches. But a lot of the applications are online now. So it you don't have to necessarily go in and ask for an application. So if I could only pick one thing, it would be the interview process. Because, is that what'd you say?
I said, what about it?
Oh, we have these particular jobs that require a certain skill set, but then the gate to get to that job is a process that has really sometimes nothing to do with what they're actually going to do in that position.
You're speaking my language.
So I have to go in. I teach, this is what I teach my students. I literally teach how to do an interview. We stand out in the hall. We all shake hands with each other. I teach them like, okay, this is a good grip. And I explain to them very clearly, like, right or wrong, we could debate that all day long. But the reality is that we live in a culture where people do judge how you shake hands, how much eye contact you have with someone. And so we go through that entire process. So now, you've got whoever, Scott, who is going through, he's applying for a job. We'll just go with what we like, let's say cybersecurity, just because that's a big field and important. But so the skill set you need for that, right, is very technical, very, there could be some client-facing stuff, but let's say they're being hired as a programmer. But then yet we put them through this process where they have to sit in a room with one or more people and potentially mask to the point of where they can't even focus on the questions necessarily because they're so worried about, am I making eye contact?
I would take that one step.
Sensory stuff.
Yeah, I would take that even one step further, is that first meeting, that first interview, the gatekeeper of it is someone from HR who their skill is soft skills, and they are looking to see someone who has all these great soft skills. And it has nothing to do with the job. I mean, look at every job offering, not every, but says like, must have great people skills. Really? Do you really need great people? You just need to not be a jerk, but you don't need to have great people skills to program. But we put this gate up of an unneeded skill, and you have to jump that hurdle.
And I think of myself. I mean, I've been in interview situations. It's nerve-wracking. It's hard. And I get along with, this is not a getting along situation, but I'm a social being. I can have conversation with anybody. Right. And so even for me, I feel like it's nerve-wracking, right? So I can't even imagine what it's like for somebody who's already on a day-to-day basis dealing with certain sensory issues, OCD. We've said a lot about autism because we're making it all about you, but
as we should.
But it's not lost on me that there are so many other things. And honestly, in most cases, right, we also know that, help me out, Nulty, what's the term? When you have multiples of these things, they don't act in isolation.
It compounds.
Yeah, it compounds.
And it isn't 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1. One thing plus one thing equals three things. Like, correct. Weight-wise.
Yeah. And so, I just, what I would love to see is, I love the advocating that somewhere, a place like NCDA continues to do. You and we've heard other people on these podcasts who are advocating for neurodivergent individuals. I would really love for us to make more space at the table for those who are neurodivergent to know that they have a voice here and that their voice is really, really important.
Right.
And, we saw some of that when we were at the annual conference, you and I know a lot of people came up to you afterwards and talked to you about that and just how inspired they were by you, because they have a story to tell also, but maybe they lack the confidence, or they're just, it's really hard for them to put themselves out there. And I want people to know, like, no, you have a place at this table and your place is really important. Like, bump me out of the table, bump me out, take my seat and come and tell us what you need and advocate. And, we will be here to support and lift you up, because everybody brings something important to the workforce. Everybody brings something important to, just the world in general.
Right.
And I think that we need those different ways of thinking, and we need, we need someone who's going to challenge us too, like with the communication and all of that. Just, as a neurotypical person, my eyes are constantly opened up by my neurodivergent students.
Right. We make a lot of these. I think a lot of people in very good intention are working toward being more accommodating, working towards like overhauling what they do, working toward being more inclusive. But unless you actually check in with somebody who needs those, sometimes they're based on stereotypes. Sometimes they're just shots in the dark. Now, as a neurodivergent person, if I walk into that space, do I recognize that someone's making an effort? Usually. Is the effort sometimes enough? No. Or is the effort even in the right direction? Or is the effort like super focused rather than these universal shifts, and they're just sort of these blanket changes rather than these intentional changes where you're thinking about your client base and how do you adjust to best serve them and their needs where they are. But we talk about this in education a lot. You have to meet a child where they are. And this goes with any sort of relationship like that, where you were trying to help, any kind of helper relationship, that you need to meet the person where they are. And you can't expect them to be where you are.
Well, and I think you said it, like, it's the intentionality of it and understanding and being, I admit I'm not perfect with any of it. I mean, in a school setting, we're making sure that we're using gender appropriate language. I mean, there's a lot. And what I always tell my students is in my heart, I want to do the right thing. So you just need to tell me. If I mess up, please just tell me, right?
Right.
But the intentionality is really important. And I also think the other piece of this is that it doesn't have to be huge steps. You can make small steps that will start to improve and open those doors for people. So the small step could be something on your website that just says, if there's something that is some sort of accommodation statement or anything like that, just puts it out there so that people know, hey, this person hears and sees me and wants to make sure that I feel comfortable.
Right. Or like, how can I communicate with you? Like realizing that getting on a phone call for me, no, thank you. I will text all day long.
You will text all day long. I think you came to the end of the internet a couple of years ago. Didn't you?
Yes, I have come to the end of the internet a few times. But like a text, I will text back and forth. A phone call, that's going to go to voicemail. And I like the anxiety that sometimes will come around a phone call. I couldn't imagine doing it, especially if it was something important. Like if I had to find a new job. If I had lost work and needed to, if suddenly I was already in a stressful situation. Because, in this, working with clients around career services, I was talking to someone the other day that people are not coming to you when they are happy and thrilled with their life. People are coming because they're out of work. People are coming because they want something more, because they want something different. They're not just coming to hang out and tell you how great their job is and they're really happy with their career trajectory. Cool. So it's already has some level of stress from the client's perspective.
Oh, sure. Even making that first phone call and appointment is
right.
Probably,
so could the appointment be a Google form on your website? And then I don't have to make a random phone call to someone I've never spoken to before. I can put that off indefinitely. But if I see just a little, I had to order something for work the other day, and I spent a lot of time on a chat with someone from one of the companies, and they said, "Oh, to do this, you're really going to have to talk to this service." And I go, "Oh, do they have their own chat service?" And they said, "No, you have to call them." And so then I ordered from somebody else who let me do it all online. Because I'm like, there's other options for me. And
as you are saying that, I am literally just realized that I've done this to people. Like, I'm doing this right now because the model, if you sort of look at all the coaching and how to get clients and all that kind of stuff, everywhere you go, it's click here for your free consultation, because you're going to have that 15-minute phone call or face-to-face with.
Yeah. Click here and then your phone rings. It's a nightmare I would wake up from.
Or whatever. But I just realized you click there and you're going to get from me okay, when can you meet?
Oh, yeah.
I need to revamp that.
I can't imagine putting give me your information and I enter my phone number and my name and my email address, and then I hit send, and like 30 seconds later, my phone rings.
Well, I'm not calling you right away, but some people do that.
But some people do that, or you just happen to be there. Like your timing works. So like on your website, go, how do you want me to contact you?
Yeah.
Or give multiple options to be contacted.
Yeah. Okay, so you asked me, so you waved your magic wand, and I spoke to you from my perspective about how I think the interview process is one that really needs. And honestly, I don't know the right answer for the interview process.
That's, I think, a big cultural shift.
Yeah, it's a really big cultural shift. I would love to talk about it more with people. I think it's a good point of discussion to kind of figure out, okay, well, we keep saying, because it's not like I haven't read, this is not a new discovery to talk about the interview process being challenging for people with neurodivergencies, but like, okay, well, what could work? What would be better? But so if you were waving your magic wand, what would you say?
I think it's one of two things. One, I would sort of take HR out of the hiring process. So like if you're going to interview for a job, interview with the supervisor.
This is not, we don't hate HR, by the way. Just
no. Like they form, but like HR is filled with people who are really good at soft skills. And so I
didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, hello.
Siri answered me. HR is really good at people with soft skills. And when you're really good at something, you like to surround yourself with people who are also good at it. And then you go and if soft skills is your tool, then you approach every problem, or you approach many of the problems from using that tool. But I think like the magic wand would be multiple methods of communication being considered equal. Like sending a text or chatting online or a phone call would be considered equally important.
At any stage of the game, like so we're talking like in the hiring process, now you have the job, now, like.
Yeah, I think like we get into some weirdness with AI now, obviously, because AI is going to be answering the questions and AI could be asking the questions.
Oh, for the interview process.
For the interview process, if you went fully online. But I really think that sort of initial contact, we tend to think that a phone call shows intention, that a phone call means you're serious. And I think we are applying mid-20th century neurotypical logic to like the kids that I'm teaching now. They don't want to talk on the phone. They want to text. And the trick is that the hiring people are often a couple, 3 generations behind. And so maybe that's my magic wand, is that like generational understanding, realizing that the way, why we communicate and how we communicate and the understood purposes of our communication changes with time. And so like as someone who steps in to help with your client, or I've talked to, when I'm talking with people on my own, realizing that communication at that moment is the right kind of communication for that individual. I can't expect them to do something the way I want it done, especially before I've hired them. And if you said, and I think, that we get into this like clarity of like, what's your intention? We get into like,
well, yeah.
Is your intention to hire somebody who's really great with people? Great. Then your interview should reflect that. And the person interviewing should be able to do that. Absolutely. Could I sell cars? No, the nightmare. like to do that sort of like cold stepping up to people. And so like if I think I was allowed in a space and was approached from like I could look and go, this is where I belong, this is where I fit in. And that gets tricky in the, we have to do a lot of skills in the interview process that we're not, like you saying, you're teaching students how to shake hands.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things as what I think is a very simple accommodation that will help everybody is making your interview questions available to people ahead of time. We put people on the spot, and honestly, it's not really, you're not really getting at the heart of the answer of the question if someone is making a last minute sort of call as to how to answer the question. Right. Because if I have a little time, then I can give you like real depth and real situations that I've dealt with. Right. But if I'm on the spot just going, yeah, one time I helped this customer, blah, 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 But anyway, I think the important thing that I want listeners and, you and I to keep working on is just making sure that we're leaving these spaces for conversations, encouraging the conversations, making sure people feel welcome and that they know that like they deserve to be, and that we want to hear their voices because it's important. And the only way we're going to be able to get changes that help to improve those statistics is by continuing to advocate and speak up. Meaning the other side of the research is that it shows that when people do hire those with neurodivergencies, it tends to improve performance overall. I can't remember the exact, it's like 40% improvement or something.
Yeah, they stay hired for longer. Higher retention rates, higher satisfaction rates, all of these things. All the things that you want, we just aren't realizing we're stuck in an older paradigm. And really we need to be as you were saying, taking these steps forward. And we're taking the steps of the size that we can, as long as we are moving in a direction that includes more of the people who want to be included and who need to be included.
And honestly, it's all a win-win to me. That's how I see it. So my life is so enriched every single day with
the diversity hire in our relationship. You hired an autistic person for a very long-term position. 25 years, high retention rate, high satisfaction. You didn't know it. You were just auditioning and you interviewed and hired an autistic person, and it worked out well.
It has worked out well. I would say my life is at least 40% better because of you.
Mine's 45% better because of you.
Oh, you just always have to one-up me.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap up. I got to go back. Speaking of all of these students,
you have students, I have papers, but really we're online, and the link will be here. And
let's keep the conversation going. I mean, I think everybody adds something to it. And
I am always excited to talk about autism inclusion, about advocacy and things like that, and how do you just to look at something and I'll go, oh yeah, that's weird. Or if we made this a lot of these changes are tiny.
Yeah.
And you just need to be willing to say, how can this be better for my client, for the people I serve?
Yep.
Thank you for talking with me. This is great.
Thank you, NCDA, for inviting us to talk. We love talking nonstop.
Yeah, we will talk all the time.